Well, welcome everyone and good afternoon. We're going to go ahead and get started, and hopefully our second panelist will be able to join us. I'm Emily Dickens, and I have the honor of working for the Society for Human Resource Management, SHRM. And it's a privilege to be here at the summit today and have the opportunity to hear from hopefully two amazing thought leaders. But if it's just one today, it'll be just fine, because we want to talk about something important: ensuring equity in the workplace. About a year ago, SHRM took over the Oculus in New York City to get people thinking about the importance of having difficult conversations about issues that impacted the workplace. We called that Combos and Coffee. And we handed out a lot of mugs and note cards that day in hopes that employers and employees would sit down for a bit of convo and coffee on a regular basis to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, in an effort to foster open, honest, civil discussions about important issues in the workplace. If we can't talk about it, we can't improve our cultures to be unfailingly welcome and inclusive to everyone. Having difficult conversations about racial equity is one of the linchpins of SHRM's Together Forward at Work platform launched this summer. The platform features a web hub of continuously changing data-driven content and resources for knowledge, learning, and collaboration. And it's for everyone, not just HR leaders. This information is far too important to hide behind a paywall. The initiative includes a Blue Ribbon Commission on Racial Equity, and SHRM has released its first round of research in a new report, The Journey to Equity and Inclusion, which reveals how Black and white workers and Black and white HR professionals experience the workplace differently. I hope you'll check it out, and the whole Together at Forward platform at shrm.org. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our panelists for today. Hopefully we're going to have a constructive conversation. We are going to have a constructive conversation about developing more inclusive and equitable cultures, especially now during this moment of difficult economic realities, a global pandemic, and renewed calls for racial justice across the world. Joining us in absentia right now is the president and CEO of SHRM, Society for Human Resource Management, Mr. Johnny C. Taylor Jr. With over 300,000 members in 165 countries, SHRM is the largest HR professional association in the world, impacting the lives of 115 million workers every day. As a global leader on the future of employment, culture, and leadership, he's a sought-after voice on all matters work, workers, and workplace. And he's frequently asked to testify both before Congress, and some of you may see his weekly column in USA Today called Ask HR. Johnny's a member of the American Workforce Policy Advisory Board, and he was appointed by President Trump as chair of the President's Advisory Board on Historically Black Colleges and Universities. He also serves on the board of the University of Miami, Jobs for America's Graduates, and the American Red Cross. Joining us today in person here is Dantaya Williams. Dantaya is the Chief Human Resources Officer at Raytheon Technologies, a Fortune 50 aerospace and defense company. She's responsible for the company's global human resources function, which is focused on talent management, diversity, inclusion, employee relations, total rewards, and employee experience. Dantaya has held a number of leadership roles in human resources throughout her 20 years at the company, including head of diversity. She's committed to serving her community and received the 2019 Maria Miller Stewart One Woman Makes a Difference Award from the Connecticut Women's Education and Legal Fund. She's a MSU, Michigan State grad, but most importantly right now, she is sitting as president of the advisory board for the University School of Human Resources and Labor Relations. We are so fortunate to have her here with us today. Hi, Dantaya, how are you?
Yeah, how are you?
Good. We're going to go ahead and get started. And I think one of the things that is really unique about your bio is that in your 20 plus years in this space, in addition to now serving as the Chief Human Resources Officer, at some point you served also as the head of diversity. We don't see that a lot in the profession of people coming from that job and then going into the larger job of being in charge of all of HR. Talk to me how that has helped you develop what your perspective is as we talk about racial equity in the workplace.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Thank you for that question. I spent the first half of my career in our manufacturing environment, focused on labor relations. And I like to say I gave up my steel-toe shoes for my high heels when I went to the corporate office, and actually had the opportunity to lead diversity at the company. When I was first asked to take on that assignment, I really paused and I thought, I don't know how this, will help drive my career forward and what it all means. And I wanted to make sure that I had an opportunity to get back to the business. But I have to tell you, very early, I grew to have a passion for the work. And really, when you realize that your job is to be an advocate for 200,000 employees every single day, and that is your job, that matters and that means something. And so when I had the opportunity to go back to the business and lead HR, I had a very different lens on leadership, a more balanced approach to leadership. Because once a diversity practitioner, always a diversity practitioner, because you don't stop valuing differences and understanding the value of those differences because you're in a new role. So I really do think it helped me to really sort of understand how our people can be our competitive advantage and how they really serve the business.
Wow, as I'm thinking about that, I think about our CEO, I think about Johnny, who came to this role as CEO of SHRM from a very different environment like you, so differently, chairman. At the point, he's been a former CEO of the Thurgood Marshall College Fund and was a labor and employment relations lawyer too, and had a chance to see diversity from the other side of providing the talent to corporate America from our students at HBCU. So absolutely, those different perspectives do matter. Talk to me a little bit about the people manager perspective. We talk a lot about this at SHRM, how people managers play an outsized role in the workplace today. And they're the front line in terms of managing a distributed staff, monitoring performance remotely, and maintaining an inclusive environment that recognizes that employees could be under stress. How do we equip them to be responsive and effective under the current circumstances?
Yeah, no, I think it's challenging for sure. Our people managers, our human resources managers are definitely on the front line trying to figure out how to stay connected, how to create an inclusive environment when everyone is in their individual homes. And we can't forget that a lot of our companies still have essential workers coming into the office or to shops every single day. So making sure that they feel safe coming into work every day as well is also huge. And we can't underestimate the impact of, elder care, child care, and, family care needs that exist in the home when you have to stay there. I think the focus is making sure that they are equipped with knowing and understanding the company's resources. For instance, at Raytheon Technologies, we leverage Bright Horizons to help us figure out some of those dependent care and elder care issues that people may have, really making sure that supervisors and people managers understanding they have empathy and they leverage flexible work arrangements to make sure that their folks can kind of get through these challenging times. But what's really neat about this, I know we talk about the challenges associated with our current environment, but I also think it's helping managers and HR leaders understand that FaceTime may not matter as much as it used to. So what it does is it opens up our pool of talent that we can bring into our organizations, because geography doesn't matter as much, because we're learning how to leverage technology to get our work done and to be more productive.
Agreed. And look, Johnny popped in just in time to talk about one of his favorite subjects. Johnny, we're talking about people managers and how crucial they are to ensuring equity and inclusion and belonging in the workplace. You want to chime in on your perspective on that?
Yes, and I want to apologize for everyone. I was back here trying to make the technology people figure this out for me. I'm an HR guy and a lawyer. I don't know anything about computers, but let me tell you, the timing of that question could not be, it's just perfect timing. As you know, this morning we hosted here at SHRM, Philonus and Rodney Floyd. They're George Floyd's brothers. And they came into the SHRM office today, and I really wanted to talk with them about what they've experienced since May 25th, 2020, but more importantly, before that, as Black men, frankly, in workplaces. And they really immediately honed in on, sure, the issues that they're the unfortunate and horrific incident that led to their brother's demise. They said, but let me tell you about what we experienced every day before before that. And they talked a lot about people managers creating environments that made them unwilling, unhappy, disinterested in coming to work. And they said it wasn't, the company had a great brand and we liked the CEO and we liked all of these people. It was our frontline manager who didn't know how to motivate people. On occasion made us feel different about ourselves and our contributions because of our race. So people managers matter. And frankly, that's it. You know, at the end of the day, what's that saying? People don't leave companies, they leave their managers. And so this is the crux of the work that we're doing. Is sometimes I know in HR, we know better. It's the managers who we're trying to help be better at their job who don't. And they're the people who result in turnover and poor employment experiences for people.
Emily, can I pull on that thread just a little bit? You know, as I think about that, it's interesting as you think about how the conversation has evolved. So remember years ago, we would go into our leadership and try to explain the business case for diversity. And then that evolved to be, you know, diversity and inclusion, and somehow rested in the comfortable word inclusion. But
right.
Now in the aftermath of all of this, you know, we are using more direct language, calling things what they are and saying racism, saying the word. And what this does is moving forward, it gives you the opportunity to continue to have these conversations with leaders, and not just to talk, but to listen, so that they can actually learn and turn these actions into measurable results, meaningful things that can really drive significant change, right? And it gives you an opportunity to talk about what the company is doing. HR can talk about all of the efforts that they have, that they've been really quiet about, but also listen to the workforce to learn and understand what else needs to be done. And I think the thing that really gives you sort of valuable, visible commitment when you think about some of these things is having diverse leadership in your senior leadership ranks. Like that's what will make, you know, the workforce know and believe that the company is truly valuing sort of those differences, right? To see themselves running the company is encouraging. It's a retention strategy, and it sort of shows that effort is being made to have a more inclusive work environment.
So Dantaya, that was a great segue into what I was going to ask you about, the importance of the C-suite getting on board and really showing the importance of inclusion and diversity and belonging. So I'd love for you to talk about that. And then Johnny, on the back end, let's talk about the employee's role in this too. We talk a lot about empathy and how managers and executives are expected to be very empathetic during this time and all along empathetic to the issues of belonging. But let's talk about, this is a partnership and employees have a role. So Dantaya, first start with what the role, continue on about what the role of the C-suite is in racial equity in workplaces and showcasing. And then Johnny, let's talk about the role of the employee. Dantaya? So
I do think that a big part of senior leadership is listening, right? So part of it is, and I'll even steal this from my supervisor, and not listening to respond, but listening to learn and understand. I think that is tremendously important as we think about what needs to take place in companies to sort of drive a strategy that can really drive significant progress. But then I also think about, you know, when I talk about sort of diverse leadership and making sure you have the right pipelines in place, having really good succession plans isn't enough. You can have succession plans with diverse candidates all day long, but when the job comes open, it doesn't guarantee that those people will get the job, right? So having that sponsorship, leveraging the C-suite to sponsor talent in a way that is authentic, making sure that those folks are visible to them through presentations, through day-to-day interactions, and through the work is something that you have to be purposeful about so that you can grow and develop the pipeline in a significant way. But I also think regular communication on why this is important, making sure that your culture, you know, Raytheon Technologies is very clear that we want to be a company where you can grow and develop and belong no matter who you are, right? And in order to do that, there are a number of things that have to take place to position the company to receive employees where they feel like that can happen. Great. Johnny?
Emily, you know, Dantaya said something, she used that magic word, culture. You know, for too long, diversity and inclusion has sort of been a program. an initiative. It has not found its way into the way the organization just does business, how it operates. I love we're often trying to find definitions for business terms, and culture is how things really get done around here. That's probably one of the best definitions, is how it works. How do you navigate this organization? What we've learned is success is when we have mainstreamed diversity and inclusion initiatives. It's just a part of how we do business. It's table stakes. You shouldn't have to have a special initiative on it. But right now, and you take us where we are, generally speaking, most of us and employers are in the earliest stages of the work, notwithstanding the fact that we've been doing it for 20 or 30 years, right? But here's a big thing, that we always think this is about senior management. And I remember back in my days as a labor and employment lawyer saying, most of the sexual harassment that we talk about in the workplace, and I'm going back to sexual harassment days, was between employees. Sometimes it was supervisor or superior, but oftentimes the hostile environment was created by other employees, oftentimes your contemporary. We find that in race, we don't do enough to talk to employees and say, you know why Johnny doesn't feel like he feels included? The boss is fine. It's his colleagues, his contemporaries, who have led to him not being able to show up full self to work. And so you're right, Emily, so much of the work that we have to do is not just, we often say, treetop, but it's also bottoms up. We've got to make sure that every employee understands that our culture is one that literally will not tolerate discriminating against people, treating them differently on account of whatever their difference is. For example, right now, and all of us know, we're in this incredibly hot and divided country over politics. And one of the things I did as a leader is I called all of my employees together and I said, listen, I know what to say and what not to say. The question is, when one of your colleagues walks into the lunchroom and you're making them feel uncomfortable, you are creating the environment that is our culture that doesn't embrace our differences. So we've got to call this out, as Dantaya said, and then we've got to hold everyone accountable. This is not just a senior management, are you hiring Black people or not? It's deep into the organization when they get here, because that checks the diversity box. It does nothing for making those people feel included once they get there.
Got it. So look, when we have these conversations, sometimes we talk about theory and we say, this is what you should be doing. Let's get a little tactical. Johnny, I opened by referencing our Convos and Coffees event in the Oculus last year, and how that really was our effort to be tactical and to help people have difficult conversations. We even have cards in the packet that have questions that can get people started on these difficult conversations. So I'd like you to talk a little bit about the importance of having these difficult conversations, how you have them as we're talking about race, bias, and other critical issues. And then Dantaya, I'd like you to talk about how those conversations happen at Raytheon and what best practices you know of personally that can help us have these difficult conversations. Johnny?
So I'm going to give you a quick answer because I want to hear from Dantaya and I also want to hear from the audience members on questions. At the end of the day, that which we can't talk about can't be fixed. I mean, that's the short to it. And we were taught, and I say this often, if you're 35 years or older, you were taught 3 things you don't for sure talk about in the workplace: religion, politics, and race. And so we just decided we were going to talk about it. And unfortunately, the result wasn't that we were solving for problems. We were just avoiding problems, and they were festering in our organizations. And the result was a screwed up culture, right? So I think the real answer is all of us as HR practitioners, if you're types of business leaders out there, you have got to get your organizations culturally ready to have uncomfortable conversations. And only when you do that can you make progress. There's this big debate that's going on amongst CEOs. I've been involved in these conversations where they're like, well, maybe we just shouldn't talk about it. We're going to say these things are off limit to discuss at work. They're going to talk about them anyway, by the way, at the water cooler, at the coffee. I mean, the conversations are occurring. The beauty of allowing people to do it and talk about it up front is you can put guardrails on it. You can make sure that there are rules of civility and respect and dignity. You can do that if people are having it out in the open. But if they are forced not to have it or to go online into separate Slack channels and all sorts of bad things come out of that. So I'd love to hear from Dantaya, what do you all do if it could be that you don't encourage these conversations at work? This notion, in short, of saying, compartmentalize your life. This you talk about at your dining room table, this you talk about at the lunch table, and the two shall not cross is frankly 19th century.
Yeah. No, we do exactly that, right? So there have always been sort of employee resource group summits, and we create space within the employee resource groups, right? And then what happened in the aftermath of George Floyd was you started to have conversations with senior leaders, ERG leaders, folks from all different races and backgrounds about something that was very difficult. Do you feel discriminated against? And asking that specific question, and not to create sympathy, but to create empathy, so that leaders and middle management and people managers overall knew what their employees were facing each and every day when they were coming to the workplace, so that when they coach them and guide them on how to drive their careers or just how to get their work done, they had a different level of understanding about differentiated development and how to approach those folks differently, right? And so, as many companies did, we had a huge, for weeks, we were having these uncomfortable conversations. But what it turned out to be, what started as a response to social injustice, evolved to a global, multifaceted diversity and inclusion strategy, diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy that didn't exist prior to this incident.
Wow, that's good to know. I want to segue just a little bit. We've talked specifically this and racial discrimination, but we know that the word diversity encompasses so many other issues. And so, for the two of you, I'd like Dantaya first to talk a little bit about how Raytheon and its underrepresented employees can access growth opportunities and promotion, because you talked a little bit about that. But then talk about the different types of diversity initiatives. You mentioned ERGs, but you may have them from other groups that are not race-based necessarily on race. And then Johnny, I'd like you to talk about something you mentioned briefly, is this is a crucial period over the next 30 to 60 days. Political affiliation and opinion in the workplace is really, it's a hot topic. And I think a lot of people are not prepared to have the discussions or to deal with it when someone is confronted, even a people manager confronted with two employees arguing over political affiliation. So Dantaya, let's first start about what you're seeing here in terms of promotion opportunities, but also not just as it relates to as it relates to race, but people with disabilities, ageism, some of those other diversity issues that we're being faced with. And then Johnny, you can take it from there.
Yeah. So I think it's a two-part question. And the first part is just, our diversity and inclusion office works really closely with our talent acquisition office so that we can cast the broadest net for talent, right? And we leverage our employers as well as to serve as ambassadors when we go to places where there are unrepresented populations to recruit. One of my favorite programs is a program that we call Reempower, that recruits people who have been out of the workforce for 2 or more years, and they're going, and they're looking to rejoin the workforce, which can be really, really difficult after you've been out for a while. And this program allows for them to have a smooth transition. And when you think about folks with disabilities and things like that, it is important that before you even try to hire, that you have software, technology, accessibility already in place. Because if you wait until you get the candidate, then that's too late, because the lead time on doing those things is tremendous. So I'm just throwing that out there when I think about other diverse aspects. But I just want to reiterate that it really does start with making sure that you have a culture of inclusion for all areas of diversity, including disabilities, age, LGBTQ+, so that when you do hire someone, they can integrate successfully. I think that is hugely important, and always keeping that connection and that lens between talent acquisition and making sure your diversity efforts are integrated into that overall strategy to make sure that you don't lose momentum. Because the thing is, this could be a flavor of the month if you don't put rigor around it.
Wow. Before Johnny Hobson, I just have to say, I totally agree. And we've seen that as we've been working on second chance work. work, hiring people who are formerly incarcerated. That is another group that people don't normally think about in the diversity conversation, but it's so critical if you're going to open your doors to people who are formerly incarcerated, that you are set up to meet their needs and to meet the questions and concerns of the employees who are already working there and making sure they're successful. I love that Reempower idea. I had to pick up the pen and write that down. That was really a good one. So Johnny, you and I, you know, we've seen it. We saw it coming. It was one of the reasons why last September we wanted people to start having difficult conversations, that these political issues at work were going to heat up, and we're seeing it. And as you said, you sat down every employee at SHRM and told them that everyone's voice would be heard. Talk a little bit more about what we're going to be facing as a country in our workplaces as it relates to these issues over the next few months.
Well, so you have two issues here. One being, and all we have to do to appreciate the first issue is that it comes to work. If you think about the day after the 2016 elections, I can tell you, aside from people being shocked, people went into their corners, and I saw a level of antagonism and anxiety and frustration. You saw it all blow up at work. Where do people spend most of the time when they're not asleep? Kind of at work, at least Monday through Friday. And so many of us were caught flat-footed because we had never had a surprise result, or at least in our lifetime, there was no surprise result. Well, the advantage that we have now is learning from 2016. By definition, you know, if you do the same thing and expect a different result, then shame on you. We know tested election. We know, like, unlike any other time in history, because of COVID, you also have the complication of not likely knowing who won the next day, right? When we could wake up in the morning and say, I knew who won. So all of that is going to come to work. And we have to understand that when we talk diversity and inclusion, it includes perspectives. That's one of the various dimensions. It's race, it's gender, it's all of the things that we know, but it also includes these political perspectives. So I would suggest that anyone listening out there get in front of this, as I've done with my employees, and every CEO I've talked with has said, we've got to get in front of this. You can't wait until the day after the election or the months if it turns into an ugly legal battle to address it. We've got to prepare. It's like, you know, I come from South Florida where you have hurricanes. You know a hurricane's coming. There are some things you do right now. Even if it blows over and the hurricane doesn't hit you, you need to be prepared for it. Well, this is a tsunami potentially. And I think we know that we need to get in the front of it. Also, the intersectionality of it all, because now we've begun to conflate certain political affiliations with race. You know, and so if you're with that party, then you're against this group. And if you're with this party, you're for this. And so all of that is intertwined when we start having conversations about racial equity. We've got to get in front of this, and this almost naivete that suggests that we don't need to deal with this because, you know, you deal with, you know, politics outside of the office. It's there, and it's going to be on full display. I can bet you can all that Wednesday morning. It's going to be on full display, and probably before then. So I'd love, Dantaya, you know, how you all do. I mean, you're a governmental contractor, for example. There's just a lot going on right now where it's not as simple as black and white. We're focused on racial equity, which is why we convened a Blue Ribbon Commission to focus on that. But think about how often politics has now become a conversation around race.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting concept, but I think, you know, it does come up in the conversations that we have across the organization. But that's why when you think about having a holistic strategy in place, you want to also make sure that as a company, you're communicating all the things that you're doing from a government relations perspective, education reform, and all of these other things. Your commitment to underserved communities is a part of that, so that folks know that they work for a company that has a soul, that has values, that cares about the communities where they work and live, right? And right. And when these conversations come up in work, you can always lean onto the company's values, and we have to hold true to those company values when we have these conversations, because when you get outside of that realm, that's where it gets a little bit sketchy. And you want to make sure that we're always being respectful while we're listening to each other.
That's right.
Wow.
We say around here, agreeing, you can disagree without being disagreeable. You confront without being confrontational. And so we are trying to help our employee bases develop that muscle, that empathy. And the only way to develop and continue to use it is if you say, this is one of our cultural truths. We will not tolerate people in our workplace who won't embrace it. And that's where business really has to step up. I don't care how good you are at your job. If you are not culturally aligned, and one of our cultural truths is respecting differences, if you can't do that, you can't work here.
Yes, that is such a powerful point, and I totally agree with you. And one way to really do that and have rigor and have systems around it is integrate those behaviors into your succession planning process, integrate those behaviors into your performance evaluation process, integrate those behaviors into what you use for your employee engagement surveys, so that it's very clear to the workforce at all levels of the organization what the company values and what they expect from their leaders.
Wow. So I knew that we could probably take this conversation on for another hour or so, and they're telling me our time is running out. And I'll say to everyone on here, thank you for coming in. And I'll just end with this, as we're talking about having these crucial discussions in the workplace. Let us as individuals, as managers, as leaders, lead with empathy. Let us lead with civility. And then also let us lead with forgiveness. So many people make mistakes, and mistakes, we're all human. And so we can't hold mistakes against people. Everyone deserves a second chance. So we think about those words in addition to the words diversity and inclusion. I think that all of the issues that the two of you discussed today could really, really be implemented in cultures across workplaces throughout the world. So I thank you all. There are tons of questions, and so I'm going to make sure I say SHRM.org has a lot of the resources I'm seeing in the questions, and our Together Forward at Work initiative also is an open and free resource for anyone who has an interest. Thank you both for joining me today.
Thank you, and sorry for being late.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.